Call to order the 893rd meeting of the Board of Directors of MSAD 27. Roll call, please.
Keith Jandro.
Here.
Isabel Lozier.
Here.
Abigail Pooler.
Here.
Toby Jandro.
Here.
Barry Willett.
Here.
Gary Sibley.
Here.
Sarah Ashley.
Here.
We have Caitlin Daigle with us on Zoom, and Gabby's not here.
Any adjustments?
I have no adjustments.
We have no one signed up for public participation. Approval of minutes for the 892nd meeting on January 13th, 2021.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
That was Keith and Isabel second.
Unanimous. Approval of financial statements for due December and January together.
So moved.
Moved by Keith,
Second.
second by Toby.
Any discussion?
I have a question on, is this,
Nope,
this,
not yet.
perfect.
That's at the end.
I'll hold some questions.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Approval of the 2019-20 audit report. Back to the
Lucy, did you want to talk about the audit report?
I have I just take your attention to page 9, which is a summary of the report. The number that everybody kind of looks for is a carry forward from one year to the other, and it's called unassigned, and including the lunch program, it's $852,865 for the 2019-20 fiscal year. 630 of that we applied towards this year's budget. And then I pay attention to page 52, the second to last page, which highlights if there were any findings in this financial audit, and there were no findings, either regular or federal award findings, and the status of last year's findings or none last year as well. So another successful audit.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Barry's gone. Superintendent's report.
Bit of a difficult topic to cover. I did want to acknowledge our great loss on January 28th, losing beloved staff member Eric Morgan. We have an amazing staff that really came together and supported both Eric's family, his two girls, and their mother Robin, and then our family as well. It was overwhelming to see we didn't have to make a meal for 2 weeks. It was amazing. A lot of community members reaching out, and obviously Eric's personality was larger than life, and he impacted so many people. So we appreciate all the support. This staff really is looking to do something to memorialize Eric and his memory. And so I shared with you a list of staff ideas, and there's lots there. In speaking with Mr. Coletta and Mr. Douctette, we feel that the best way to proceed moving forward is to create some kind of scholarship fund. We feel that it's most appropriate, especially if we base it around athletics and make it such that it's some kind of athletic memorial fund. Mr. Douctette and Mr. Coletta have some ideas about how to use some proceeds from basketball games to fund that. And if we partner that with some of the other suggestions that staff members have, they can be used as feeders for the scholarship fund. If a 5K is going to be put in place, the entry fees for the 5K can be towards the scholarship fund. So we really feel that that is the best way to memorialize Eric, and to recognize either one or two outstanding seniors each year during graduation with that scholarship award. So we hope we have your blessing in that. There's also an idea here of some kind of a portrait to go up, and we feel that would probably be appropriate as well, just so that these halls can always have Eric's face somewhere in them, and you know, this is one of the places that he enjoyed being in the most, and he impacted so many, so we feel that is appropriate as well. You guys have any thoughts and suggestions about that?
I like the idea of the scholarship. I think that something will last, carry on forever.
And we
Along with
appreciate.
the portrait, I think that
Can I just say, I commissioned my niece already to do the portrait. That was something that I was gonna actually donate myself, so.
Appreciate that. You know, there was some great suggestions about naming things or whatever. Eric would not have wanted that kind of, his personality wasn't that way to want to have his name on a field or a gymnasium. It just doesn't fit his personality. But impacting the lives of kids is what he was all about, and this is very appropriate for the scholarship fund.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, do we need anything from us, or?
If you guys want to, you know, if you guys want to vote on it just for your stamp of approval, for the record, that would be great.
Motion to approve the Mr. Eric Workton Memorial Scholarship Fund.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
Thank you. I do have some updates from the Department of Education. The first one being vaccination updates. We have very, very excited staff right now with the, first of all, the announcement of the age-based process that Governor Mills put in over a week ago was exciting because we knew that education staff would have their own pathway to those vaccination clinics. But then last week's announcement that school-based staff will be prioritized was extremely, extremely exciting. So much so, the day after the announcement, Northern Maine Medical had to call me and say, can you tell your staff to stop calling us because we don't have answers yet about how we're going to do this. We found a lot out over the weekend and today that essentially there are two pathways towards getting a vaccination. One is the federal program, which is being supported by the Biden administration to get all staff, all school staff vaccinated. That pathway is specific to getting your vaccine through a pharmacy, a qualifying pharmacy. They will not be sending the federal vaccines to clinics or to hospitals. You can only get that at a qualifying clinic. And in Aroostook County, I believe the only qualifying clinics are Walgreens here in Fort Kent, Walgreens in Holton, and Walmart in Presque Isle, and I believe Walmart in Holton as well. I don't think there are any others. So we've sent out a notice to our staff to keep monitoring those clinics to see if they can get in on an appointment. Staff have been doing that. Many have appointments for this week, and we're going to let them go to their appointments and work with them so that that can get done. The second pathway is the age-based pathway, which was the governor's original plan, and that's been sped up quite a bit because of the pressing need for staff to get vaccinated. We actually have a clinic set up for our 60-plus-year-olds. There's a clinic that's going to be held on Friday the 12th, right after school in Madawaska at the KC Hall, and Saturday 9:00 a.m. here at Fort Kent KC Hall. Our staff can go to either one depending on what their availability is. So we've reached out to every 60 and older staff member and asked them if they want to be on the list. Those who have said yes are on the list, which includes board members. you will be contacted when your age group comes up, if you want it at that time. In addition to that, we're also, if we have extra vaccines, we'll be able to ask that the spouses of those staff members can also get vaccinated, but we won't know until we have the doses. So we're collecting that data right now and hoping that that will happen. We're anxious to find out if in only a couple of weeks our 50 to 59-year-olds will have the advantage of doing that. So these two pathways continue to move simultaneously. With the clinics, we're always going to try to do it on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning so that staff don't have to leave work for that. Also, for the second dose of a Moderna or Pfizer vaccine, we know that there is some effects that some people do get ill, so having that on a Friday or a Saturday gives them the weekend to recover. So we're very excited about the vaccine updates right now. One thing staff are asking is which vaccine they're going to be getting when they go to a clinic. We don't know, and we just advise them take whatever is there. So that's the vaccination update. Last week we also got an update on the capacity limits are going to increase. Indoor gatherings are going to move to 50% capacity on March 26th. What that means is if our gymnasium has a capacity of 400 people, we'll be able to put 200 in there if we need to, as long as all of the other safety measures are followed. So face masking, 3-foot distancing in school among students, 6-foot distancing among staff. That needs to stay in place. If it's an indoor gathering where masks are off, like the cafeteria for lunch, we still need to maintain a 6-foot distancing. So you can't put, you still can't put, 50% capacity when eating is going on. And then that increases up to 75% capacity on May 24th. The outdoor gatherings move to 75% on March 26th and 100% capacity on May 24th, which means we'll be able to fill our football stadium on May 24th, which is really great. We don't have a football stadium, but if we did, we could. So we're excited about that's going to give the administrators a little bit more flexibility on how they can have students in groupings moving forward. And then finally, we had some graduation guidance that was put out on March 3rd, but due to the governor's announcement about capacity limits, it's kind of contradictory. In that guidance they put out on March 3rd, they're saying that indoor graduations will only be able to have 50 people. Outdoor would be 100 people. Large outdoor gatherings where you have separate quadrants, you could do up to 200 people, 50 in each quadrant. And if you do a drive-in theater or a venue that has cars similar to what we had here last year, they just want to ensure that you have a 6-foot distancing between the cars. And they're saying that family members need to remain in the cars at all times. So we'll see how that works out. I do know that the administrators here are interested in an outdoor graduation if weather cooperates, because it was such a big success last year. It seems to be in demand. So more news on that as we move forward. Any questions on those updates? I also gave you a handout on the latest legislative committee position on bills, so that you got to see how Main School Management, what their position is on some of these bills. Please note that this social media letter that's circulating around Facebook right now, specific to gender equality things, there's no legislative measure on that. And Main School Management actually put out a statement today saying that that is untrue. The facts that are put out in that letter are false, and Main School Management has put out policies in the past, but there is no legislative measure specific to what is being circulated on social media. Any questions on that?
Are any of these ones that that relate to us directly that you know of?
There was one specific to RSU formation, extending beyond the K to 12. I don't know if it made its way here. I didn't notice it. But I know that was one that had been asked to be put in, but I don't see it, unless you see it, I don't think it made it.
The only one that struck to me was 176, LD 176, and I have no idea if that was relative to us. or
No,
not.
that one's specific to the Dexter region,
Oh, okay.
because they don't have an RSC, and they're working on governance. I think they're trying to look for some flexibility. We good on that one? The budget approval process, I already gave you the vaccination update and the DOE update. The budget approval process for next year, the governor did put out an executive order 8A, which essentially says that the budget approval process will mirror last year's process, where we have to have some kind of virtual presentation of the budget available to the public. We can do that either in-house, where we have groups of people throughout different buildings, or we can live stream it, or both. And it's simply a presentation, and then the budget approval process will be at referendum vote, where folks will just vote that one time versus voting in a gym and then approving at the polls. So we're doing the same thing that we did last year. That's just an extension. And school reintegration update. I have Mr. Coletta and Mr. Doucette here. I don't know if you wanted to just give the board an update on how things are going here as we enter our third week of being back in school. Mr. Coletta, Mr. Doucette.
We've got probably about 90 of our near 400 learners still doing remote learning at this time. The students that are in are very happy to be here. We've been using a three-panel divider that they've been taking to classes and using those during class. They've been fully masked. We haven't had any issues with anybody at this point. Everyone's been wonderful. I'm so proud of the way everybody is kind of, they're psyched to be back. They want to do everything they can to stay back. We're very, very proud. I went by just a couple times today in the classes. Everyone is. And to see really good engagement, and one thing to get people's attention and focus is to be out of school, going remote for a while. Even though remote's going well, but people are really, really happy to be back. That's both staff and students alike. So, really encouraged. We had our WOW assembly today, which is kind of recognizes a male and female student from each of the high school classes and a staff member. That went well for this. For the second quarter. We do that every quarter. Mr. Doucette did one of those just before February vacation for the middle school with Circle of Warriors. So we're recognizing students and for the good deeds they're doing, and I think they're very happy to be done, and we're happy to be moving forward. And the government, the governors and the DOE's change in as Mr. Serwak just said, changing the amount of people we can have in the gym is going to be really nice. We'll be able to have our sports banquets with parents there, to help their children celebrate, their student athletes celebrate, the past winter season. And we're also doing the fall sports that we didn't get a chance to finish those. We're going to finish those up as well this month. Yeah, and then the other thing is middle school basketball is playing right now, and skiing. Kind of finishing up right now. So we've had a good little stretch back.
Thank you, Mr. Coletta. Mr. Neto is not here. He apologizes for not being here, but he also reports that things are going well. One thing that I'm noticing from both buildings is that, and Mr. Doucette, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but and Mr. Michaud, behavior incidents are way down this year, comparatively speaking. I usually see all of these suspension notifications, and I'm telling you, they're just not coming in this year. So I think our students are rising above to the challenge and just appreciating, like Mr. Coletta said, appreciating being here and really adhering to everything we're throwing at them, which is not easy. I know Mr. Coletta just mentioned the partitions that we have for students, and I thought I saw one here. This is not a mandate, but it is something that we put in as an extra layer of precaution, and if you will, I mean, students are using these, and they're working behind them, and they have face masks on, and they're social distancing, and it's a lot, and they're doing it. So we commend them, and we commend our staff for working with our students every day on just, getting through one more day. One thing that we've talked about as an administrative team is how can we sprinkle back some fun, social distance fun, but how can we make things, more enjoyable? So we're looking at some different ways to bring back some of that, and make sure that, we're not just focused on solely academics, but we want to, try to treat our kids like kids a little bit and make sure that they have some of that as well. So,
which reminds me, we've got a wellness day coming up that we have yearly, but we'll be having that at the ski hill, both the high school one day and the middle school another day. Later this month, or early April. So we're gonna sprinkle that fun in, that's for sure.
thank you.
In Fort Kent Elementary, I just met with the school climate today, and we do have an activity on the 19th. We're gonna call it Fun Friday, and we'll have little activities both inside and outside of the building, so teachers are excited about that as well.
Thank you all. Any questions from the board members? And you do have your administrator reports as well. And that's all I had under superintendent.
Move on to committee reports. Policy committee meeting date.
Yeah, we have a couple of policies that we're going to need to go over. One is the social media policy. I do want to revisit that and make sure that we have the right tools in place in that social media policy specific to staff use. Another one that I feel we need to revisit is specific to solicitation or petitioning in schools. We had an incident that occurred during the petition process for school board members, where a petition was actually brought into school, and staff members were encouraged to come in and sign petitions if they were from a specific community, where a board member, where an individual was running or planned to run for board member. And then it became denounced to us through an email from the Wallagrass town manager that it was apparent that some signatures had been forged on said petition. And when the staff member was approached, they were very honest that, yes, some family members had come to sign in and said, I have the permission to sign for my husband. I have the permission to sign for my sister, my brother-in-law, and so I searched for some kind of policy that to govern what we do here. We have solicitation in school, but it has nothing to do with petitioning. I'd like to add that in there. I think it's important that this doesn't happen again. I did follow up with the town manager of Wallagrass today to find out if Wallagrass is going to be following up with this or pushing for anything further, and she said they were not, but is glad we're going to look into a policy so that here at school anyway, something like that doesn't happen again. I think in retrospect, in talking with the staff member who brought in the petition, I reflected on maybe you should ask the town manager first for permission to do that, if you can do that. But definitely B, you shouldn't be using the school time to do things like that. They were under the impression that they weren't taking up school time. They just said, hey, if you have free time, come in and sign this if you live from Wallagrass. But I would like to have a policy so that there's some teeth in this, so we don't have this mistake again. Because it is a mistake, in my opinion. So, policy committee is Toby
Keith,
and Abby and Keith.
you're on policy, right, Keith?
Am I really?
Oh, no, it's Barry. It's Barry. It's
Hey,
Barry.
I'm just trying to be quiet, that's all I was trying to be.
It's Barry.
It's like a big game of
Do you want me to shoot you some dates? Is that the best way you want to do that, or you want to iron that out now?
If you've got some dates you're looking at, I've got my calendar to take care of everybody else.
And I'd be looking at, I know that you're all working, but if we can do a late afternoon, anytime between 3 and 5, that would be great.
Tuesdays and Thursdays are out for me,
Okay.
but other than that, yeah.
I'll just throw out this Wednesday, the 10th. We do this Wednesday or next Monday or next Wednesday. So the 10th or the 15th or the 17th. If it's the 17th, we could have a St. Patrick's Day party at the same time.
I think there are policies against that.
That's true.
I'm okay with the 10th or the 17th.
Abby and Barry?
Unknown. I know that Mondays work good for me.
Okay.
I'm leaving tomorrow morning, coming back Thursday for fishing.
Okay.
So, I don't know what I can do.
I can do after after 5:30 on the 10th. I can do the 15th, and I can't do the 17th.
How
Well,
about,
15th 's the Valley Unified meeting here, right?
yep.
Like, oh, I'm not even gonna be in town.
15th a day.
Oh, I'll be back in the afternoon.
How about I send you guys some dates and then
Yeah.
we'll-
Yep.
yeah, let me just shoot you some
June
dates.
and July.
Okay. Busy people.
Okay, items of business, old business, Valley Unified Education Service Center.
So we had our last Valley Unified meeting 2 Mondays ago, and in that meeting, we had an agenda item where essentially we're looking at each section of the current ILA to see if anyone wants to bring up any concerns or any questions regarding it. So we went through sections 1 through 10 in that meeting, and I put some yellow notes in what was discussed and what was shared for possible revision in the future. One of them that was mentioned was the fact that the ILA still makes mention to regional service center, and it was suggested by the assistant superintendent that perhaps we look to change the regional to educational, because that's what we really are throughout the document. It was suggested for item 5 term that perhaps the 25-year agreement is no longer necessary because there is no outstanding indebtedness that would, happen with a regional school. So is a 25-year agreement necessary now that we don't have that bonding for that school? For 8, it was suggested that the entire section 8 be revisited, in the entirety, items A through H. For 9, A and C and D, those items, A, C, and D under 9, make mention to the regional integrated consolidated school. And since we will not have such school, is it necessary to keep that language in there? Item A is the incubator language, item C is the services, and then item D is the transportation. I see no harm in leaving it in there. Maybe in the future another school will happen, but we can also consider removing it. And then the final thing was for item B in that, under 9, it was suggested that because the shared administrative services under item B say all of the positions that we can share, it was suggested that maybe we put in an appendix listing all of what we do share, so that we always have that as a document we can always reference. So those were the suggestions that were made. And what I'd like to do is, on the 15th, the next meeting is continue with items 11 through 20. And then once we've identified all of the issues, then we can proceed with how to address those. I don't know if anybody had any questions about that.
I guess I'd have a question about the regional school. Was it, my understanding procedurally is that we couldn't form a regional school, we couldn't build a regional school without forming an RSU. Is that correct?
Correct. We couldn't govern it,
Couldn't govern it.
and they wouldn't let us build it without having a governance in place.
Yeah. So, if that's the case, then this entity will never be able to build a school.
Correct.
I guess I don't understand the purpose of leaving that in there if we can't legally build a school using this document. But I watched the Madawaska meeting, and they're pretty intent on keeping it in there. And I think the reason given was, it was, how was it put? So that way we wouldn't have to renegotiate the terms of putting it back in when it was time to do it again, when it was time to build another school, when it was time to go back to building a school. I guess, I don't know what to make of that. Suggests to me that that we're gonna be back to the table again on that same issue. And I don't know if any of you guys watched the Madawaska meeting.
Well, that's the same feeling I get, is we leave the door open to rehash everything under the service center where it should be under the RSU governance structure. So, I don't see a need for that language in here anymore. I don't know how all of you feel about it, but if a service center can't govern a consolidated school, there's no need for that language in the interlocal agreement.
Sarah?
That seems to make sense. If it has to be a different governance, then that different governance should be negotiated.
Isabel? Bear? Abby? So I guess we're all in agreement that the 27th board feels it should be out of there.
And it's a fair argument. I don't think it was, I didn't bring it up to the Madawaska School Committee, but it is a good point.
Yeah. I mean, and Giselle, you were the one who raised the issue of not negotiating it later. I mean, what were you thinking about, like, I just want to better understand what you were thinking when you suggested that to the board.
I don't have the language right here, but there is mention that there may be future grants. So that's what I was thinking.
What would you think, I mean, you talked about how we wouldn't have to renegotiate. What are you thinking we would renegotiate?
I think at the time, and I am not sure exactly how I said it, but I think I then continued with not just the governance. I was talking about the funding formula and mentioned that that was already in there.
What do you mean the funding formula?
The funding for the cost sharing. So I think I skipped from governance to cost sharing in my comment.
Okay. Yeah, it was just, they were talking about the specifically the issue of building a regional school, and as I understood it, was just this idea that if we take it out, we'll have to renegotiate the details of a regional school if we have to put it back in later. But then you talked about governance, about the other stuff, like the share later, because there was they crossed their wires on the governance versus how much the payment is. They were thinking They were the same, even though that would be awesome. It'd be great if we only paid a third. But we don't. So I guess, I mean, if we remove it, what kind of negotiation needs to happen for us to put it back in?
I don't have the document in front of me right now. And to be honest, I didn't have it in front of me then. And I started speaking and was actually going toward the financing.
Okay.
And to be honest, I still feel it's not harming right now, and it's creating a lot of discussion back and forth, so it's like, it's not hurting anything, just keep moving on, keep moving forward. That was my mentality at that meeting.
Yeah.
I think it was the Madawaska School Committee, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but from what I remember, it was their contention that this document was created with all parties in agreement, so let's not change it if we don't have to.
Well, I think given the contentious nature of what we were just talking about on that we need to wipe that out of there, and if we are ever going to attempt to do a school together again, that we need to renegotiate and have entirely new language, because that clearly did not work for us.
Maybe there needs to be language that stipulates upon formation of an RSU, the following terms may apply.
And it's hard to figure out what the DOE is going to say 4 years from now when a new governor may be in office, and who knows, you know?
Well, I mean, that's my fear, is that we go into a change in regime, and they decide that the RSU is not necessary, and then we're in a position again where we're outgunned, outvoted. I mean, Frenchville hasn't met yet, but I would bet a coffee at rocks that they're not going to want to change anything. And that's the way it's going to be. I mean, there's other issues here. I mean, the term, 25-year term, that's a lot of time for nothing. The governing body, governance was an issue for us. Once again, we're outgunned, outvoted, but we still got the money in the ring. Yeah, I mean, those were the big issues. When it says a VU board member, it's me mostly. So I don't know. I mean, do we still feel like that those are issues that are important to us?
Well, I guess I have a question
Should have been a
are
lawyer.
we
Barry.
going to form an RSU? I mean, we keep bringing it up. Did the board decide that we're going to form an RSU? Did I miss something?
Toby, I brought it up.
Yeah.
Are you referring to 9A? Because that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just remember they were asking about the regional school.
And when I see this, it serves as an incubator for planning and startup functions, programs, and services related to the establishment of a regional integrated consolidated secondary school. I think that language is important if ever another opportunity comes up. And then I switched over to financing.
Is that a rhetorical question, Barry?
Well, I mean, did we decide that we were going to form an RSU?
No, we didn't.
Okay, well, then we keep bringing it up, so people are assuming that we are. And I never supported that. That's my own question. It came up on a couple of topics here tonight,
Well, but I think that's a separate issue though, Barry, is because the state had said that we can't move forward with the project until we form an RSU. It's not that anyone was asking for an RSU, it's just that that was the restriction that was put on us by the state. The state said you can't move forward without forming an RSU. I don't think anyone at the table today is necessarily saying we need an RSU. I think we're just saying that that used to be a necessary step. It's currently a necessary step, but it may not be a necessary step in the future. And that's the issue, is if in 3 years, or whenever Janet Mills is done, it changes again, we have a different commissioner, it could be that we don't need an RSU to form a regional school again. And then we'll be in a position like we were in October, where whatever we say doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's...
Well, I just don't want people to assume that we've agreed on an RSU.
Well, I wish people
That's
talk
my
about it
only
more, actually, because like that was what we had the negotiations on, was the RSU issue.
If we had formed an RSU 3 years ago, we could have avoided a few of these issues that did come up
Mm-hmm.
regarding the commissioner saying, hey, you guys got governance issues you need to take care of first. So there we were backpedaling.
Yeah.
So if there's ever a chance at a consolidated school in the St. John Valley, we're not gonna have a choice but to do it via an RSU.
Unless they change it and then they allow a service center and then we're bound by what we
If they
allow in
modify the
this.
statute to include service centers along with RSUs and SADs.
Right, but then if they did that, then we would be bound by this document. And I
Correct.
think that's what Toby is saying, is we don't want to be bound by this document when it comes to 9.
Not when the Valley Unified Board isn't set up proportionate
Right.
to the amount of citizens we represent.
And for the two of you that are new, okay, by statute, an RSU has to have proportional share. This doesn't have a proportional share. An SAD has to have a proportional share. You guys all remember the nightmare of reproportionment, you and Barry. So that's the difference here, is that statutorily, if you were to build a school right now, you need to have a government structure that involves a proportional vote. This doesn't have a proportional vote. So originally my understanding was there was talk of allowing a school to be built under this structure, but subsequently it was decided that we needed an RSU from on high. So. Gary, you're quiet. Josh?
I'm in complete agreement with your thoughts on it. Just, like you say, when the administration changes, and we don't want to get caught into a situation where they say, you can use a service center, like we were somewhat under the impression with the page that that was gonna work, then all of a sudden it didn't work, and just protection for us in the future.
I don't know, regional schools are gonna come back in our lap in the near future either. It all might be moved.
Well, I mean, the board is talking about restructuring how this thing works. I mean, on high, the school construction committee and the State Board of Education are both having discussions, because I think we are the third failed attempt, maybe fourth?
We're
We
second. Well,
count-
third if you go back to
to
the
Rockland,
original
yeah.
Rockland, yeah.
Yeah, so third failed attempt. So I think there was some cognizance that this form isn't working. So I think they're gonna go back to the table and restructure, so anything's possible. I don't think a whole lot of the money went into the pot. So what do we do about it I mean, we know what we wanna change. We know that Madawaska's already made the decision that they're not gonna accept any of the changes. What's that mean for us?
Looks like we're not going anywhere.
Well, we don't have any choice.
That's right.
Does it take 7/9 vote to amend the ILA?
Yes.
I guess knowing that this attempt failed, what, you may not know, but what is Madawaska's position on not wanting to renegotiate issues that created the failure?
I believe, and again, I don't want to speak for the Madawaska School Committee, but I believe the conversations that we had last Monday were that there is no regional schools, so now we just have an ILA that governs shared services. And they went into an agreement with you of an equal distribution of votes on those shared services and a proportionate share in costs. So that, I think Giselle and Lucy, you guys were there, I think that was their point, is that there's no school anymore. It's not gonna be a $20 million budget anymore, it's gonna be just for shared services. So why change what everybody agreed on, was what I took away from that.
Part of it also was to just let things die down right now. And let's stop we want this, we don't. I think it was just, it's not gonna bother, and the formulas are set for sharing. I think, and again, I don't want to speak for them either, but I got the feeling that let's continue with the shared services, let's focus on what we can continue with.
And I think those are two different things, right? The governance body and how, you know, those things, but if there's no school, then there's no need to have language about a school. It just seems extra. Does that do that?
So my mindset was, let's go through the exercise of going through the entire ILA, and maybe some of it is, I hate to say negotiated, but at least if we go through the, you know, and it gives us time to iron out, you know, what doesn't work. The more that we highlight that, a partnership's not gonna work unless we iron out what doesn't work. I think it's the only way to go forth with a working partnership. In my mind. Then you hug it out.
Anyone have any additional comments?
Well, I guess my comments are, shared services need to be agreed upon by Frenchville, Madawaska, and Fort Kent. And if one doesn't want to share, then they have the right not to. And so it's going to be basically up to who wants to share what with who, individual.
Is that accurate? Like, is it Valley Unified that decides what we share, or is it us that decides what we share?
Valley Unified agrees to what you share based on what you guys take to the table.
That's not going to work.
So, no, but no, I want a point of clarification, I want to make sure I understand. So, if we decide we want to share everything, Valley Unified says that's fine, then that's fine.
Right.
If we say we want to share everything except for the time clock, then the time clock's out.
I don't know at what point I don't know.
So,
I don't know if this, can you guys help? I don't know if this board says we don't want this, if that's set in stone, or if that's gotta be approved by Valley Unified.
Because it's currently shared, I think the three should probably decide on what is going to be shared or not. I think every board has the right to go and make their suggestions and their requests and discuss it. But I think as a board,
Right, but
I
the
think
point,
we don't get to
if we
choose.
don't want something, does that automatically mean we don't have to have it? Or does that go to the Valley Unified Board and we get outvoted 6-3?
it's a good question.
Which is the issue with the governance, once again, moving forward.
I think that this all goes back to whenever we had the same attorney for all three parties drafting this ILA for us. We never took this all into consideration. And there's a lot of gray area, and I think that's where we asked at the last Valley Unified meeting that we kind of clarify what exactly are we sharing right now, because that kind of seems like it might be a little bit fluid at the moment. And if we can kind of nail it down a little bit, then each board understands what they're sharing, what they're not, who's working under the service center and who's not. So,
Well, didn't we used to share a music teacher and we don't do that anymore?
Yeah.
I don't remember voting on that in Valley Unified.
I think it might have been before.
No, this was after Valley Unified was
It
formed.
was not a Valley Unified sharing, it was just between two schools.
And the food service person?
Food service person,
It's the
it is shared under Valley Unified.
But Madawaska doesn't share that, does
Yeah.
she? They do? Okay.
I think some of the confusion also is we had tri-district
Yeah,
partnership prior to the service center, right?
right.
We started sharing some employees that were still employees of SAD 27, I believe.
Right.
And the other school units were probably reimbursing us for their time.
So I think this
And I kind
document,
of morphed into a Valley Unified position afterwards,
We
right?
make the distinction of how if they're Valley Unified versus tri-district by the cost share agreement. Any employee who's shared with the VUSC cost share, we put under VUSC. Any employees such as like the curriculum coordinators, 1/3, that's a tri-district versus, because it doesn't follow the same cost share agreement. The need is not the same in each district as if they were a Valley Unified.
Adultette's another one, which is not shared with 33, it's just Madawaska and 27.
So I think this document will be helpful, the one I just passed out to you. If you look in that gray box, essentially what we're trying to identify is everything that this district funded alone prior to VU. So a superintendent, salary and benefits, a finance director, salary benefits, technology integrator, which was a curriculum person as well, salary and benefits, adult education director, adult education secretary, food service director, and then your financial system. We did not have Time Clock Plus back then, but we did have Power School. So today's cost for that, you see the bottom line, that's today's cost for that if you were to fund those things at that level on your own. If you look at the purple, and you can see 3 of those items are not in the Valley Unified budget, right? So the technology integrator, which has become the curriculum coordinator, is not in the Valley Unified budget because, like Keith said, that was a tri-district position that we agreed a third each because it's the same work. And then adult ed and the adult ed secretary is just shared between Madawaska and us. So those aren't in the Valley Unified budget. Then you can see the additional shared services that you get provided by VU. You get an assistant superintendent service. You get innovative programs and community outreach services. You get a health educator for 8th graders at the tech center, a career instructor at the tech center, a half-time French integrator that comes into our elementary schools, transit bus services, and then PD that we offer. So you can see what the total budget for Valley Unified is on that bottom line, and your share of that budget at 51% is roughly $291,000. Now, if we bring back in the cost of a third of a curriculum coordinator, and then a third of the adult ed director and secretary, you'll see your total for shared services at $403,305. So for this district, at today's cost, it's a savings of almost $200,000. And finally, in the blue boxes, if you look at what we've added since we've done tri-district or Valley Unified, we've added an additional kindergarten teacher. We had 3, now we have 4. We added an additional second grade teacher. We had 3, now we have 4. We added an additional middle school teacher. We added a middle school behavior interventionist and a half-time music educator. So we've added those positions based on the savings that you generated for shared services.
Well, we also shut down 2 schools.
We did.
And I mean, 3 of these positions didn't exist before. I mean, if we back out the assistant superintendent, we back out the, Peter's position,
Yep.
that $186,000 disappears.
If you back them out.
Yeah, we didn't have them, and we didn't have it. We have a vice superintendent we didn't have before.
Right.
I mean, we can't count that as a thing that we're somehow missing out on. I mean, we didn't have it.
But you benefit by getting them. So even with more positions, it costs you less.
But we don't need more positions, and it doesn't look like we have any chance to say that we have any choice.
So even if you went with just the basic positions that you used to have, you're still looking at more money for less positions. I know what you're saying, but I'm just trying to highlight the fact that this district, out of all 3, saved the most amount of money in Valley Unified.
But we had most of these positions already.
Correct.
So, I mean, apples to apples. Frenchville had 1 person who did everything, and now they benefit from having 25 administrators. And we are paying for them, half of them. And we can't not have them anymore. Like, if tomorrow we decided we didn't want to have one of these positions, we couldn't vote no, is what you're telling me.
I said I don't know.
I think because they're part of that budget, and that budget is approved by the VUESC, I think you have a point. It has to be approved by the VUESC. But the whole VUESC was built as a collaborative group. If there are certain things you do not wish to have anymore, then it affects the other 2. So I don't know that it's a cafeteria shopping or a we want it or not. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it feels very much like we have a situation where we just have to take it. Like, it's not cafeteria, we do what they want. I mean, that's what this arrangement is. if I had to sum it up. I mean, if we go back, I mean, I asked Ben for some old, you were present at the consolidation meetings, right, Giselle?
From the get-go.
Back in 2015, I mean,
Started in 2014.
well, I only got 15. But going back that far, Frenchville and Madawaska were working together, and their plan was to build a school in Frenchville. That was the only plan. And it was decided at that time that they couldn't possibly do it without bringing in a third party. Barry, you were at that meeting.
That's partially true. I'm gonna correct part of that.
So
Fort
what,
Kent was invited, but at the time, Superintendent Doak opted, because he had spoken to the board, I imagine, said that SAD 27 was not interested.
that's true. And what happened was, there was a conversation, and Tim Doak said, we're not in the position you're in, because what had happened, what precipitated this was
And so
Madawaska.
therefore, the other two were continuing forward. Superintendent Desjardins even went to the State Department to find out, what does it cost per square foot, what size of school? That continued.
Mhm.
But then it grew because we had Superintendent Silwa, who then came and invited us for a strategic plan. And at that point, it became collaborative with 3 boards.
But-
And it was not just superintendents making decisions, these were board decisions.
But what was interesting to me was that the Barry and Danny Nicholas went with Tim Doak to meet.
Correct.
And at that time, what had precipitated the entire conversation was Madawaska had had another failed budget, and they needed some capital expenses paid. They were in trouble because they needed some repairs to the school, and that was in the notes.
That was not the gist of it. You're taking part of it. I wrote those minutes.
I know. You want to read them?
No, I have that. But there was a lot more to it. You're taking certain things from it, yes. There had
Yes.
been some failed budgets.
Mhm.
But the point was, we're all decreasing in student population. That was the major discussion. And that we were in need of looking at the future
Mhm.
so we could offer more programming to students. And it was mentioned that we were probably the beginning of what would happen in other districts, failed budgets. And was that something that came true? Yes.
It was. So, what I was saying was, when Tim and Barry and Danny were invited, the conversation was around the fact that our school is in pretty good shape, which was confirmed, I think, when the engineers came and checked things out. The decision was made that, well, SAD 27 decided they weren't ready to give up their school, and they said that. They said, we are in no position, we're not gonna give up our school. We don't feel like we should close our high school. Barry, you were there for that meeting. You might not remember, but you were there. So subsequently, Fern Desjardins invited Madawaska to participate in a consolidation committee meeting. And that took place in April 2015. And at that time, some of it's gonna sound familiar. They said they were untouchables, that the elementary school in Madawaska and Frenchville would be untouchable, which is something we've heard throughout this process. That carried over from there. It was also suggested that the DOE would need to create special legislation to allow the construction, this project to go forward. There was some money thrown around. Scott Brown was involved in that conversation at that time. He was still with the DOE, and his issue was that the numbers were low and they would need to bring in another party, because Madawaska and Frenchville's numbers alone would not be enough to necessitate the building of a new school.
Again, the gist of it was, it would be best if the entire valley were to collaborate and do this.
Well, it says here, Scott Brown asked for the numbers. We were low in numbers. If FK would be interested, it might have been better. And then there was a talk about like how to do it. Can we modify Wisdom High School? And then there was like St. John Valley Technical Center was the first choice, so it was more palatable to all. And it's a neutral place and a better choice. And then there was consensus. We've heard that word a number of times. The consensus was we're going to build a school at SJVTC. And they were voted, and it was consensus was found. Then there was something about maybe we should get all three communities involved, and the question was, do we have all three communities? And the answer was not necessarily. They said Fort Kent is very interested in that type of thing, not necessarily the building idea. And Fern suggested that we pass laws and change and make changes so that way we can make this happen. There was a question. Dawn said, what we need to do as a group is take ownership of this project to alleviate downfalls that may come. We don't want others to dictate to us. We want to drive this. And then Fern asked, do we extend an invitation to SAD 27 to join us? And the consensus was we move forward with this group.
I think at that time, SAD 27 was in a very different place than they were when I became your superintendent. Because when I became your superintendent, you were having failed budgets. In fact, I believe I came in on the third or fourth in a row. So there was a different SAD 27 in 2015, 2014, than just a few years later.
But I think we still are in a position where we're looking at ourselves, and our two neighbors had found themselves in a position where they were stuck.
I don't think so. I disagree.
Well, in the Bangor Daily News article, you said you guys were stuck. You were quoted by Julia Bailey saying you were stuck, that you were either going to have to consolidate, or the voters are going to have to buck up, and it's quoted right in the DDN.
Consolidation at the time was for the two.
But yeah, it was for the two, but it was clear that there were issues. So I guess what I'm saying is, we are the odd man out at Valley Unified.
Toby, I have 3 other pages, with respect, I have 3 other pages of this timeline that indicates all the other meetings, once we did the strategic plan,
Yeah?
that indicates which boards we went to. When I say we, I mean the 3 superintendents at that point. Which boards signed on to each project, each grant, each of the ILA, everything. So we're not mentioning when the doors opened and SAD 27 and 33 and Madawaska opted to collaborate, and that's a big term. There was full-hearted collaboration by 3 superintendents.
I was there. I remember collaborating.
And so we can't forget that at each step, every board had an opportunity to approve or not whether we were going to continue collaborating, whether we were going to have an ILA, whether or not we were going to work together towards another grant for a pilot school. All of that was done with collaboration. So to highlight the very beginning where Madawaska and 33 were working together, that was because 27 opted at that point. No, we're not interested.
But I would say this though, just as because we're not having a local school, we shouldn't vote it out. We should keep it in the agreement. Your group voted us out. The consensus was to exclude us. Just as we want to exclude the local school, you excluded us. And I would ask you, I mean,
I don't think so.
Keith, if you would have known about those meetings and what I just read, would that have changed your decision going into Valley Unified?
As a site selection committee member, absolutely.
How about on when we did the interlocal agreement?
I think I would have gone in there with a more critical eye as far as.
But that involved different players, you guys.
This is totally different
It involved
twist.
different. In fact, there are 4 board members around this table that voted for everything, Valley Unified. Every vote, yes, you supported.
But
Those were different players before.
But the question is, if we'd have known about this, if we would have known that they'd already picked a site.
Toby, you're painting that picture and it's not accurate.
But it's right there.
No, SAD 27 with Tim Doak as superintendent and Barry was there, said absolutely not, we don't want this, we're not ready for it. That doesn't disallow 2 other groups from moving forward.
But you excluded us. You said by consensus, we're not involving them. We're going to need them, but we're not involving them.
No. That's
Okay,
a twist
I
on
think it's time
words,
we
Toby.
probably move forward on this. A couple things we do need answers to would be
So,
each district
Your
and
ILA,
what they get to choose.
your ILA has an item number 14, minimum member obligation, and the language says, except as otherwise expressly provided in this agreement, each member hereby agrees to purchase all of the functions, programs, and services made available to it by the Regional Service Center.
So we don't have any choice.
But isn't there also language in there that says you can choose? How does that? Is that speaking
Yeah, it all
of Valley
depends.
Unified, or is,
It's what Valley Unified chooses for the services.
Well, I can tell you that if Valley Unified is gonna drive something down SAD 27's throat, it's not gonna stay there long. I mean, it's just not gonna stay there. First of all, we're at the point now where basically, we found that we were maybe naive and we made some bad decisions, but we're no longer a yes vote. We are gonna make decisions based on SAD 27, not Valley Unified, as this board.
this
That's why
just
I'm on the
further
board.
supports how much we need to still straighten out the governance?
That's correct.
None of it matters, guys. We don't have any say.
Well, the only
You're
thing
talking
is,
for
like I said, they
nothing.
can't drive it down our throat because.
No, you're wasting your breath, Barry. You can't say anything. Go to a meeting and vote. Vote, put a motion out there. The answer's gonna be simple. Why would they give up our money? We're dumb money. We
I'm
just
just
give
telling
them
you.
money, we keep our mouth shut. We don't have a vote.
Telling you, Valley Unified's not gonna drive the stuff down our throat.
Watch them.
Nope.
Yep.
Let's move on to shared services.
So my recommendation to you, because you're saving money and because you're getting benefited services, because you have an additional kindergarten teacher, second grade, and yes, we closed down elementary schools, but we also have more now. We are a fully functioning Valley Unified Administrative team. And I know for some of you, you may not understand or value one position or another, but we are a fully functioning team that really serves you well. We are looking at possible phasing out to attrition. You know, we have one administrator right now, you know, examining, you know, maybe a reduced role. That's all, you know, it's not neither here nor there. Every time we do that, or we you know, eliminate one of these through retirement, it's going to be additional savings. We always had that as part of our plan. Never to kick anyone out, but always to become more efficient. So my recommendation to you is to continue with your shared services because they're working for you. And I know it's frustrating based on what happened the past year where you didn't have one person, specifically the superintendent, advocating for your special interests, but now that this regional school business is done, we don't have to worry about any of that anymore. We just need to move forward and build and improve. That's just my position on
Except for the ILA.
Except for the LA. Well, what difference does it make what we choose to share or not? Maybe we should have Frenchville, Madawaska come tell us what we can do. 'Cause that's where we are. Our will means nothing. I mean, which ones do you want to keep? Which ones do you want to keep, make go away? We don't have any say. This is just play acting. We're not doing anything. This board is irrelevant.
Well, the point of the matter is that the state is funding some of the stuff that they've never been funded before. Like the salary. Well, SAD 27, what does it pay? We pay about 35 or 40,000 a year salary?
salary and benefits.
Salary and benefits, but I mean, because of certain agreements, the state gives you money. So these numbers, they look good. They're not really a good picture.
So Ben, with the shared administrative personnel, I mean, I'm new to the Valley Unified Board, but initially, whenever they first met, did they vote on which personnel will be shared? I know here it says may, shared administrative personnel may include without limitation.
Right.
I know we're looking at kind of sorting through that and figuring out, but
Yes.
it seems like there's a lot of leeway there, and I think we leave it up to your discretion is what it boils down to.
Well, what happened, Keith, when we created this, we didn't want to kick people out. So you had essentially 3 superintendents that had to look at each other and say, okay, which one of us is going, which one of us is staying? And it was determined that, I go back in time and maybe I'll change my mind, but I stepped up and said, I'm willing to take this challenge. And Giselle, God love her, she said, I'm willing to take an assistant role. But we had gone into this knowing that we're not just going to kick people out on the street because they had, given years of service. So that's when the whole conversation about, you know, absorbing through attrition came about. And we have, in our grant application for our school, we have pages of staff members and the years of their projected retirement where we generated savings in 2020, 2021, 2022. And this is part of that.
I guess there's a lot of question marks. I mean, it mentions central office administration assistant, data manager, technology director, transportation director. So, I mean, it just sounds like at any point you could just say, hey, Peter Madawaska needs to get a new bus, can you help us out with that? I mean, I just want to know what are our employees doing and what are they not? Do they have that?
I would never take something to the Value Unified Board without trying to gain your approval first. I would never say, okay, I would never, for example, technology directors in there. I would never pull the wool over your eyes and say, you know, go to the Value Unified Board and say, I think we should have a unified technology director and have them vote on it. Now all of a sudden you guys are, you know, are obligated to that. That's not fair. So it's always been our approach to talk about it with the boards here, like we're doing now, gain approval, and then move to Value Unified. So we've never been held hostage up till now because it's always been on the recommendations that we give you. Just like I'm recommending now that this is the right way to, in my opinion, to move forward. I know it looks like we have a lot of administrators in that Valley Unified form, but we're 3 districts, so we're the size of a Presque Isle who has those administrative services. You know, I know, you know, for you all, you don't need all of those, but because you have all of those, you have more and you've generated some savings. And there will be additional savings to come. Lucy presented the Valley Unified budget, and it looks like there will be a stagnant or even a reduced budget if things go well. And we're still on the fence with some administrative positions, as I mentioned a while ago. So the goal here was always to create efficiencies and give advantages and opportunities to those districts that didn't have them as much. I'm not going to lie to you, SAP 33 has benefited from all of these services that they never had before, but they haven't benefited financially the way that you have.
I think we agreed at the time that some of these positions, whether complete positions or half positions, were necessary to keep during the school project. But now that the school project is done, we need to look at those positions and decide whether we need them or not.
Right.
Because we had identified positions like that.
And so the conversations that we're having with one administrator is central to that, for sure.
Well, I know we're covering a lot of ground, like geography, but the number of students in Valley Unified right now is less than we had in SAD 27 in 1994. The number of buildings that are being administrated is one more than we did in 1994 in SAD 27. We had one superintendent. It feels like a bit of smoke and mirrors. And not that it matters, because we could opt to choose not to share 5 of these things and it wouldn't make any difference. But I don't know. I remember when we met, that was the idea, was we needed this stopgap. And now that the school's not being built, that stopgap's not necessary. And I don't know. I don't know what rubs me more the wrong way, the fact that it doesn't matter what I say, or the fact that I disagree. I don't know. Sarah, you're quiet.
Yeah. I don't have I haven't been around before Valley Unified, so it's hard for me to grasp a before and after comparison. I think we do a lot of things well. I think there's areas that we need to do better.
So how many board members have worked under other superintendents before? let's put it out there. How are things since I've become your superintendent? And if they're worse, tell me, and we'll deal with that. But I have always been under the impression that I have served you well, even in the past 2 years as a shared superintendent. I've served you well, as compared to, and that's not to spite any previous superintendents. That's not my intent. But my fit for this district seems to have been quite a good fit. Am I wrong in that assumption?
I can't argue that point, Ben. I just think there's a lot of things have changed as a district. Obviously, we're down to 2 buildings. You know, we were arguing the point to ask for our outlying schools to be closed. That was our contentious point of issue back then, and passing budgets. Now we've got so many moving parts to this with Valley Unified and this interlocal agreement, and now getting the school behind us. I don't think it's fair. I wouldn't ask anybody to compare superintendents.
Well, I guess you're the only superintendent that I've been working with that I had to share.
Fort Fairfield and Caribou share a superintendent. Mars Hill and Van Buren share a superintendent. You have now in Aroostook County, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 superintendents that are principal superintendents. These are changing times. Less kids. We've got to change our thinking.
How do we want to handle this sharing thing?
What?
This,
Well, I think at the present time, I mean, we want to continue with it, but we also need to get the governance straightened out. We need to be able to have a say, representative of our population. I mean, there's no doubt it's cost savings. You don't want to give up.
I don't necessarily think it's costly. We've expanded our administrative class by leaps and bounds compared to what we had before. We went from having a superintendent to having basically 3 superintendents. You know, it saves money like going to, you know, it's like, I can't even think of a good analogy, but I'm not entirely sure. But I don't think we're being critical enough by just saying, yeah, let's just go ahead and do everything again. I think this is where I'm torn. On one hand, I think we have a duty to our electorate to be critical of what we're agreeing to pay for and what we're agreeing to share, right? But on the other hand, it doesn't really matter what we decide, because we don't get to choose.
But would the other 2 districts opt to pick and choose? Maybe they'd want to do an a la carte type thing too. Maybe
Is there anything in this first box right here that we would not have if we were standalone? If it was just SAD 27, we weren't sharing any services, would we have all of these in the very box? We'd have a superintendent, we'd have Lucy, technology, adult ed, food service.
Was our food service before integrated with a head cook position though? Wasn't Charlie both?
Yeah.
So do we now have a head cook and a food service person?
Our food service person is not a cook.
So we now have Charlie, we have Charlie's old position of head cook and a food service person.
We're one less in that kitchen. We're one less in that kitchen.
Okay.
I mean, we can agree those costs right there are pretty much real, right?
Yep.
And Ben, you're saying what we're paying right now is 403
Yep.
through Valley Unified?
Valley Unified, you're paying $291. but then you add in the two positions that are, or the three positions that are not in Valley Unified. One third of the curriculum coordinator, then the adult ed director and secretary. That brings you to 403.
I mean, clearly there is savings. We just need to be able to have a say in Valley Unified and not be outvoted 6-3 all the time.
I mean, I think those are
That's
two
the
separate
issue to
issues.
me, is the governance.
Well, for me is that we're not, like, if tomorrow it's decided that, you know, I mean, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's gonna happen. And that's, I just don't like the fact that this board has no control over who it employs in this, on these pages. Like, we don't have any say anymore. I mean, are you okay with that?
No, clearly not. That's why I'm saying governance is the issue.
But we can't change governance, Gary. This is our reality now, forever, 25 years. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're okay with that, I mean, put it to motion. I'm gonna abstain because I'm not gonna vote for something that doesn't matter. We don't have any say. We can pretend, raise our hands, but it's a joke.
No, I know we don't, and that is the issue.
I can guarantee you that if there was something in the shared service I would not support or would not think is needed anymore, I would not recommend it to you. And I can tell you, Mr. Sibley is right. Now that the school is not in our future, we're gonna have to look hard at these shared services, at what's needed and what's not. Not having the school has taken quite a bit off of my plate. So I'm a big eater, as you can all see, so I'm ready to put more on, and that's okay. I just don't want to see us dismantle what really is a really functioning center. I don't want to see us dismantle it based on hard feelings. I always remain optimistic that issues can be resolved through conversations and understanding, and I think right now maybe Valley Unified is too new of a loss to bridge those conversations, but I think time heals and we can get there.
So, at our next Valley Unified meeting, maybe we need to have a more targeted discussion about the shared services. Maybe devote more time to that, as well as governance. Because those issues aren't going away.
They're not changing either.
Not at this table.
Well, it doesn't matter. I guess what I'm saying is, this is the last time we need to talk about this, because nothing we say.
But our partners need to know where we're coming from.
They know where we're coming. They don't care. I went to the meeting. They made it clear. This is what we agreed to, tough.
How do you feel, Gary?
I mean, clearly we need to sit down, we need to talk to 33 in Madawaska. And we all stand to gain from this, but we all need our own security and insurance that we're not gonna have things driven down our throat as being a large member of the shared service center. And you would hope that they would be agreeable to conceding that, because they're clearly gaining, 33 is gaining personnel like no one else. Madawaska's gaining, I'm sure, from cost savings like us.
33 was in our district, would have shut it down. I mean, it was the same, it's a small school.
Right. So, we need to have some conversation, we need to try and strike an agreement. Acceptance that the school is not gonna happen present day. I don't know. Anyone else have anything they want to add? Ben, what are you looking for from us?
Well, I don't feel comfortable taking a recommendation to Valley Unified Board if this board is not comfortable supporting it. I remain transparent with all of you. I'm not going to try to railroad one district or another. My recommendation is that you support these shared services, especially given the time of the year where we now need to have decisions made in order to build a budget. I think it's the right move, definitely, for now. And we take the next year to do exactly what you said, Mr. Chairman, is have conversations that need to be had about, you know, the future of this partnership.
Toby, would you be comfortable if Ben agreed right here tonight? I mean, we're being recorded, it's going out there, but if any one of the three partners doesn't agree to any additional personnel in Valley Unified, that person is, that position or whatever is not added in?
Lynn?
If Ben recommends, or the other two districts say, we want this position.
Well, they
and we
need a
say-
7
And we
nights
say
anyway.
we don't, and we say we don't want it.
Yeah.
That Ben agrees that he will not move forward with recommending that position unless all three districts, until we hammer out governance.
We need 7 nights anyway here. You couldn't add anything to this, you couldn't change the thing without a 7 nights vote. We would have to have one person vote for it. So it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, the promise doesn't, I mean, we ultimately would have to decide anyway. It's not Ben that decides, it's us that decides. I mean, and this isn't about Ben, this is just about where we're gonna sit. Like, I don't think we're adequately uncomfortable here. That's all. So, I mean, put it to vote. Like I said, I don't particularly have an issue, I just have an issue that we don't have any say. Like, I don't like voting for something that's pretend. So this is a pretend vote. We don't have any say. So if you wanna put it to vote, put it to vote. Fine with me.
Anyone else have any comments, feelings?
If we don't change anything, we use last year's budget at Valley Unified, right? And that's pretty,
And that's what Lucy presented. It's probably not gonna be identical to last year's budget, because costs do
Right.
go up. But with the carry forward, it looks like it may balance out, so it will be, at worst, an identical budget. Right, Lucy?
Yes.
Barry, your thoughts?
Really. I voted for so many things that was put off and say, well, it's gonna get better later, that I'm tired of it. I'm not gonna support anything again. I don't have all the facts, and that goes with shared services. I'm not willing to do anything other than look at it, and I don't care if you're gonna wait another year to do it. I'm not gonna agree to anything short-term, so it gives somebody another year. Not gonna happen.
Adam?
I think, I mean, I haven't been around for that long, obviously, but I think I agree with what Toby is saying, like, it's not necessarily an issue of shared services and things like that, but what say we have in the matter, which we don't have one, so that's kind of where I'm at.
I agree with what you said and kind of, you know, what he said with the whole, like, where we don't really necessarily have a say no matter what, but the shared services are. I mean, the other certain aspect we don't really have a say, like, either way.
Keith?
We're
How
bound
do
by
you
the
feel?
we're bound by the terms of the ILA. I mean, we can go back several years back in meetings and say, look, this is what we signed up for. Did we understand what we were signing up for at the time? Probably not.
Nope.
But it is what it is, and I don't think anything we can say tonight is going to change that.
Sarah?
I guess, a vote to say, yes, we want to do this, or not. I mean, even if we don't do anything, we have these, we fall back on last year's budget, we have these, and then in the coming year, we work on the ILA and outlining what it is that we want in getting that say and resolving the differences and the issues. Because I mean, it doesn't seem like saying, yes, we want this, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of warm fuzzy feelings here. But if we just don't say, yes, we want this, we still get it for the next year, right? Is that?
So I guess as a board, then our position is gonna be that until we have definitive language and issues resolved, that we're not gonna take a position or make a motion on this. Move on to MSAD 27 planning discussion.
I just wanted to make you aware of some planning that's going on specific to intervention. You have a document in front of you called Camp Kindergarten that we're going to be looking to implement this summer prior to the school year, where essentially we're bringing in our pre-K kids that are in most need of preparation for kindergarten and having a 3-week intervention program for them. Mr. Netto is currently looking into staffing who are interested in this. The more staff that we can get, the more programming we can offer. We're also looking in both buildings at vacation schools, April break, summer break, and potentially even harvest break of intervention periods, just so we can try to recapture learning. But Camp Kindergarten is one of our cute ideas that we hope is going to be a hit, and if it is, possibly something we can offer in the future. We're also looking at remote learning, remote teaching and remote learning for the future. All indications point to school staff being vaccinated before the fall. However, our students will most likely not be vaccinated. So a lot of our safety measures will probably still be in place next school year, which means that we'll probably still have students that opt for remote learning. At the elementary level, we're proud of what we did this year to dedicate 2 teachers for remote learning. That model really worked well, and we'd probably be looking to do that again next year if the numbers warrant it. But at the high school level, we're trying to find solutions of how we can make that more sustainable, because what we're doing right now, especially for our staff, it works well for students to follow a schedule. It's hard for staff to balance asynchronous learning. It's hard for them to balance live kids and remote kids at the same time. It's just really hard. So some ideas that we're throwing together. Option 1 obviously is a pie in the sky idea of dedicating teachers even at the high school level, but between you, me, and these 4 walls, there's no way we're going to get that many certified teachers at the high school level to come in. So I don't know that option 1 is even an option. Option 2 seems like a very promising idea, where essentially we're looking to work with our current teachers and possibly free them up for a remote period. So your freshman English teacher would have 5 periods a day or 6 periods a day, and one of those periods would be just remote learners, and try to do that with math, with science, maybe in partnering with our Valley Unified Schools. We can look to have a solution to that. Option 3 is to partner with an online learning company. There are some online platforms that offer remote options. Edgenuity and Mentum, essentially your students are logging into a program and they're receiving instruction and learning from the program. We're not really super jazzed about going this direction, just because our kids wouldn't be taught by our teachers. But perhaps in now rethinking about this option 3, if we can have our teachers create online asynchronous learning courses, similar to what some of us have taken as college courses before, where you go in and module 1 is laid out for you, module 2, module 3, and then the teachers have some office hours so you can reach out to them. It might have some potential. And then option 4 is maybe we call remote learning expanded alternative learning. And essentially we're expanding TOPS Academy to include a remote academy under that umbrella. We're just tossing out ideas right now and looking at different things. Like I said, option 2 probably has the most promise if we can work out the scheduling kinks. That way it's our teachers teaching our kids and freeing them up on remote blocks. and maybe even an option 3 tied into that, where some courses are outlined as asynchronous learning courses. So we're thinking about this. We plan on soon after April break, putting out a lot of surveys to figure out which students will be remote, which students will not be. We're probably more likely to look at a more long-term commitment for remote learning, because one of the biggest concerns that we've had from our teachers is the in and out remote learning. A month here, a month there has been really, really challenging. So more of a, you're committing for the year type thing is what we're looking for, or at least half a year for sure, especially if we're gonna, we're gonna staff it and we're going to really work out the bumps. We want to know who needs to be a remote learner for all the right reasons. Obviously, if you're required to quarantine, you can still access remote learning for that period of required quarantine, but we're talking about the full-time remote learners. So we'll keep you updated as we continue our planning, but that's where we are right now.
Ben, I have a question. Are there any staff that wish not to be vaccinated?
Very low, very, very low. I think SAD 27, we've gone through the 60-plus-year-olds. I think we had one that said no. So really high numbers throughout the whole valley. Yeah, staff are really looking for it. I don't know if that's going to change when we get to the lower ages, but I know our 60-plus, they're all on board.
Hey Ben, about this, I feel like a broken record, but maybe the answer is different for your pre-K through 5 versus, like, because you'd have, that looks like 2 teachers if you did for this dedicated, which like we did this year.
Oh, yeah, our model
for
for elementary, we're sticking with it.
And then 6 through 12.
Looking at a different
something
model.
else.
Yep. No, we really like
Okay.
our model for elementary. Yep, for sure.
Ben, in regards to remote learning and snow days, I mean, we've talked in the past that with remote learning, we wouldn't actually be having snow days per se.
Yep.
Where are we going with
There's
that in the
two
future?
things that are preventing it from a Department of Education standpoint and a U.S. Agriculture Food Service. So the 2 things that are sticking points, one is the required meals. Right now we have a waiver for required meals and all students get free lunches. But in a normal school year, if it's a school day, school lunches have to be provided. So you almost have to either predict the snow day and send kids home with a bag lunch, or you send out your bus drivers in a snowstorm to go deliver meals, which is probably not a good idea. So that's one of the hiccups that we're not looking into, but the department is looking into how the federal government can look to either provide waivers around that or come up with creative solutions. The other one is actually in statute, main statute. There's a requirement for snow days that basically has an hour calculation for making up snow days. So for every snow day, students need to be back in school for X amount of hours per every snow day missed. And that's actually not allowing for a remote day to count for a regular day. It's fine this year because there's a waiver, but they would have to strike that from the statutes and basically put some language regarding remote days also count as a regular school day. So those are the 2 things that are kind of a sticking point right now.
Sr2 funding?
I just wanted to let you know that we're going through looking at our Sr2 funding, suggestions from staff. Depending on what we do with the future of remote learning, we may be talking to you all about, okay, we'd like to fund a teacher or 2 with Sr2 funds. We'd like to fund our additional school nurse another year. If we're not going to move it to the regular budget, fund it with Sr2 funds. So we're examining that right now. We've done a lot with technology. In fact, on your way out, if you peek in some of these classrooms, you'll see the new clear touch display boards in the classrooms that are amazing. Staff have new technology devices. So we've done really well with the needs to support remote learning and in-classroom learning. But the longevity of this funding definitely is to look to secure staffing that we need. Our temporary support personnel have been a godsend, and we probably look at keeping those folks on board, especially if we still have required quarantine for students next year. But also, in addition to that, is we sit in a really good place with our sizes where some school districts right now in the state are looking to lease buildings because they can't get their kids all in school. We don't have that problem. We can get them all in with the minimum requirements. The only hiccup is if we have to move to that hybrid model, we can't anymore, so it would be shifts. I wouldn't recommend to you that we have to rent space. Maybe at Fort Kent Elementary School, a little bit more space would be really nice. But we're sitting good with that. So it's going to be mostly staffing and then looking at what our additional needs are. I want to remind you, these Sr2 funds do last for longer than a year, so it's upwards of 2 to 3 years that we have the funding. The only catch is that in order to access those funds, we have to put out the application in advance. So you almost have to predict the future so that you can access the funds, but we can go back in and revise it afterwards. So it's not really a big deal.
How much is available?
We have we have a little more than $800,000 in that fund. And then with the package that's about to pass Congress right now, the $1.9 trillion, that's going to give school districts access to $130 billion. And I think 30 of that is accessible this year, and then the other 100 is next year. So we're gonna see some more of this funding coming. I love the Democrats.
Nancy, you must like that. You must like that. That looks pretty good.
New business, retirements.
We do have a retirement announcement. This is a letter that I'd like to read to you. Dear Superintendent Sirwa, please accept this letter as notification of my retirement from SAD 27 effective June 25, 2021. It is with mixed feelings that I retire after a 34-year career in public education, 11 years with SAD 33 and 23 years with SAD 27. I leave this very rewarding profession. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you in the past, present members of SAD 27 Board of Directors for the support and guidance throughout my time spent here, both as a classroom teacher and as a member of the administrative team. The professional growth opportunities that were afforded to me are endless: local, state, and national conferences, workshops, master's degree, leadership networks, and the honor of representing our school district while serving on numerous statewide MPA and MIAAA committees, to say the least. It's been a pleasure and honor serving with the communities of SAD 27. I leave my position feeling confident the school district will continue providing the highest quality education to its students. I truly will miss being part of it. However, I do look forward to my retirement years, spending time traveling with my wife and enjoying my children and grandchildren. I can proudly say that I not only did I work for SAD 27, both of my children were fortunate enough to have graduated from Fort Kent Community High School. Sincerely, Paul Michaud. So, Paul Michaud, congratulations on your retirement plans.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to accept Paul's.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
I have another retirement notification, not quite as wordy as Mr. Michaud's. It simply says, Ben, I was asked to advise you that I'm going to retire April 15, 2021. Thank you, Don Sear.
Also to accept.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
I like that.
As far as openings, we do currently have a posting for our CHS, VRMS athletic director, PE teacher. We also just put out an in-house posting for our adult ed literacy person, now that Mary Willett is going to be retiring. You approved that retirement last meeting. So those are our postings right now.
So I see there's a little something about a dean of students to replace Paul. Like, it's not going to be a vice principal, it's going to be dean of students. We had talked a few years ago as a board, and it may just been me and you together, Ben, about maybe, and this is just something we had spitballed, the idea that maybe we should look into getting a social worker or something to, like, would it be helpful to have somebody with that kind of background doing the vice principal position, because so much of what Paul had to deal with was behavioral issues.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about having a dean of students posting, is that you don't lock yourself into only administrative certification.
Okay.
You kind of branch that out a little bit. So I know Mr. Neto is working on some language off of what we created for Mr. Doucette and Mr. Coletta of what his ideal person would be.
Cool, good, good.
Which is Paul Michaud, but now that Paul Michaud is gone.
Snow day professional development.
And I don't think this got in your packets, and I apologize for that, so I have it on the, ooh, we're gonna have to make it bigger than that. Professional development plan for unexpected cancellations and student snow days. We actually gave this a test run on our snow day last week, and I felt confident doing that, knowing that we have a workshop day at the end of the year. So in the event that you don't approve this plan for future ones, we've already made up that professional development day that's coming at the end of the year. But essentially, what we're asking of our educators, and when I talk about education staff, I'm talking about your teachers, ed tech, social workers, guidance personnel, library personnel, administrators, therapists. So essentially the folks that work with kids and are not year-round employees who are hourly, we offer this PD snow day guidance. So education staff can work remotely from home according to the expectations below, but may come into school if travel conditions allow for it. The framework is essentially the administrator will have a mandatory Zoom meeting at 8 a.m. And do roll call with their staff and set expectations. And then do another Zoom meeting after lunch. So if they establish lunch is 11 to 11:30, then they're having their meeting at 11:30, and do the same thing to set expectations for the afternoon. And the expectations are outlined in the document, where we're asking staff to do 3+ hours of PD training. One of them comes from our Target Solutions assignment portal. Those are our suite of mandatory trainings, like sexual harassment training and bloodborne pathogens training. Really, really riveting stuff that the staff really love doing. The second one is our Otis for Educators online PD platform, where they basically get to choose the PD that they're going to do. What's nice about both of these is, as administrators, we can go in on the backside and see how many hours each staff logged in on each, so we can get reports based on the usage of those programs. And then staff can also put in a PD plan if they're not going to do one of those two things, but they're going to work on a special project. They can submit a PD request with their administrator to do that. Then we move on to about an hour of staff collaboration. That's where we're going to have some mandatory meetings of our data team, or mandatory meeting of the supportive school environment team, or maybe we're putting all of the English teachers together for a meeting of Valley Unified English teachers or whatnot. So we have some staff collaboration requirements in there. And then the rest of the day is for their planning and independent work. Like I said, we did this last, what was our snow day? Tuesday. The feedback from staff was unbelievable. I mean, they really valued this day because it gave them an opportunity to really catch up on a lot of stuff, and knowing that future snow days, if approved by this board, are not going to pile up on June 22, June 23, June 24. Staff are so in tune with doing the online stuff now. Essentially, all of our PD has moved to online, so having them do it from home is just as efficient as doing it from here. We prefer them here when we can have them here, but we trust them as professionals to do this. Ed techs are still clocking in from home, so they're going in for the Time Clock Plus. They're clocking in, starting their day, clocking out for lunch. Everybody else is not on a time clock basis, so they're just working within the framework.
Ben, I don't know if I didn't share it with you, but I actually went into Otis, and there were 28 courses completed on that day by our staff. So I can see who's put in the majority of time in there, and it was well used.
And some staff were really good. They would reach out and say, instead of Otis for Educators, I'm going to go into, like Travis Delisle was one of them. He has an online suite of PE professional development series. He says, can I do this instead of that? Absolutely. We're going to allow whatever professional development is good for you.
the list of 4 required safety trainings has gone down tremendously also. So there's 4 units that every staff member has.
I think I'm still on the list.
I'm on the list. But for teachers and other staff, it's come down tremendously. They use the time.
So does this take the place of a scheduled PD day?
This takes the place of a scheduled teacher workday or ed tech workday in the event of a snow dismissal. And that's for now, because we have a waiver for the students. So moving on beyond this year, hopefully we have a solution to PD remote days, where that day will become a remote day. But this is just a solution for this year, because we have that.
So would the student day shift onto that PD day
The s-
rather than at the end of the year?
The student day is exempt because of the waiver this year.
You're talking
But in the
two different
future.
things.
In the future, it would become a remote day. Yeah, it would be a student remote day. So you're teaching your kids.
Gary, are you asking if it actually changes the calendar?
Right.
This one does not.
Right.
No. The teachers work on that day.
Right, but like if this Friday
Yep.
were a workshop, this doesn't take the place of that.
No,
Was that your question, Gary?
unless it's a snow day, then it would.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it doesn't change the school
It takes
calendar.
us like a
here.
week to plan a professional development day. Peter and I have been working on ours Friday for quite some time. I don't think I could just pull that out in a day's time.
So this is
to
instead
replace
of them coming in June,
Yeah.
after students are done.
Yeah. And just so that you know, there are some school districts that are waiving teacher days. They're saying, well, the kids aren't coming to school, the staff aren't coming to school, so we're just gonna waive it. I think as contracted individuals who have X amount of days, we can be more creative than that and have our teachers do some beneficial work instead of waiving that day completely. And staff had some good feedback from it.
So do we have a motion?
So moved to approve the Valley-Unified Professional Development Snow Day plan.
So what does this act, okay, wait for the discussion, I'll ask.
A second?
I'll say.
Isabel?
So what does this actually change then?
The teachers won't have to come in on June 22 and make up the
And
day.
that's it?
And it would be a
Okay,
PD
so there's
day
no
anyway.
policy change or anything?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's the question.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? MSAD 27 technology.
I had reached out to Keith as a member of the technology committee when we learned about Don Sears' plans to retire, and talked briefly about, you know, how we're going to fill this position in on the short term and then moving forward in the long term. Short term is Don's done in April 15, that's right before April break. We're gonna need somebody right after April break. And then long term is how do we meet the needs of this district so that the position is meeting our needs. So speaking with AnnMarie and kind of brainstorming some ideas, we really think that the future of this is to combine a position or modify the position to be more of a technology integrator position, which is something we had in the past and has gone away, but bringing back that integrator position with somebody who has IT skills and can help with IT services as well, feels like something that would be a benefit to the district. And what I'd like to propose is that we entertain bids to fill the position with a contracted service for the short term, while we advertise it possibly for ourselves, and then look at how that contracted service works to finish out this school year, and then decide moving forward how we best want to plan for the future. So I'm hoping that that's something that you can get behind, but I understand if you have questions about what an integrator would do differently than an IT, I'm willing, and I'm sure AnnMarie can help you out as well, answering those questions.
I think the only question I had, you probably answered it, was actual on-site availability of that person during the school day. And it wasn't gonna be a situation where we actually had to call a third party to have somebody dispatched.
And
Yeah,
that-
if we go the short term with the contracted person, that contracted person would be here 5 days a week, 80 hours a day.
8 hours a day, that's a lot of hours per day.
8 hours a day?
80 hours a day or 8?
No, 8.
Oh, phew.
8.
It's just wax, it's wax.
8.
And that's something we would request in our, when we put out for bids, that we would want that guarantee.
Can you find somebody in 20 days?
I feel quite confident that we can.
Okay, yeah, all right. And what are you looking for time frame for contracted service?
I think we would look to finish out this school year as a short term and then assess whether the service worked out for us and then decide how we want to proceed in the long term.
In the short term is how long? Like
Through June 30th.
$5 months? Yep.
Motion to approve a contracted service agreement for technology integration IT services for the district.
Second.
Any discussion?
Are we gonna see the contract before we agree to it?
Yeah, we can do that. Well, you have to approve
The contract, okay. Yeah, I guess I would just say that we would approve
Putting out the bid.
putting it up to bid, not necessarily the contracted service. So I guess I would move to amend the motion to read that we would move to put up to bid a contracted service. Can I get a second?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the amended motion? All those in favor? Unanimous. 2021-22 proposed meeting dates.
You have a list of proposed meeting dates for next year. They're identical dates to this year. It's just one day off, so again, repeating Mondays every 5 weeks or so. And it follows, like I said, exactly in line with what we proposed this year, or what we approved this year. And then we'd of course build in special board meetings or emergency board meetings as needed, as we did this year.
The dates look good to everyone.
I tried to stay away from hunting season, and you see that vary. I only have November 1 and then nothing till December 13th. So I think you're available.
Yeah, November 1, maybe not.
Well, that's only
You're available.
Do you need a motion for that?
Yeah.
So we'll,
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Budget workshop number 1, overview of 2021-22 budget.
And I just want to do this because we do have some new board members, and I basically want to just go over really quickly what the budget process is. And if you think I'm talking too fast and you want to stop me, please do, but I'll just keep going on until somebody interrupts me. Essentially, when we're building a budget, we're looking at what the process is, and we're trying to look at all the different moving parts, policies, preparation, the input from individuals, then creating that budget, building support, and communicating it. For budget development, we have to work within the state law and local policy. It's things we're bound that we have to do, and that's part of the process as well. And then we build in the budget preparation steps that I'd just like to go over with you right now. Step 1 is a trend analysis where we review our audits, and Lucy, went over the audit today. We have another successful audit, but we also review the expenditures and patterns with those expenditures. We analyze the EPS spending in other districts as comparison, especially districts our size, and then we look at our month-to-month and patterns for revenues as well. That's all always ongoing. That's why you see financials every time we meet, so that's part of just monitoring how we're doing. Student enrollment is the driving force behind building a budget. Less students means less funding. Less funding means tighter budgets. So you're always looking to see how the student enrollments, what that means when we're building that budget. So we're looking at projections, the live births. We're looking at our registrations, how many tuition students we're bringing in, how many we're losing, any agreements we have with neighboring districts for superintendent's agreements. Our October and April counts with the DOE, our graduation, and then our incoming or exiting student information. Obviously, you have 56 kids graduating, and you have 45 coming into pre-K. That's a net loss, so we're always looking at that carefully. And with enrollment comes the staffing projections. So we look at our current enrollment projections, and then we decide on what our needs are. We look at retirements, and we're always looking for that ideal 1/3 spread of experience. That means you have a third of your staff, ideally, which would be between years 0 and 10, a third of your staff between years 11 and 20, and then years staff beyond year 20, your experienced staff. It's a good spread on experience. We're pretty good with that spread here in the district, so we meet that ideal spread. We look at our bargaining agreements. What are our agreements in regards to salaries and increases and steps, and staff PD for their education, title funds that we have, and then for certain positions, we always look at holding back unless we're completely sure. Step 4 is progress monitoring, looking at those monthly, quarterly processes, our budgeted versus our expenditures. So how much did we budget last year versus how much are we spending, and is there going to be any carry forward with that? Year-to-year expenditures, communication of that budget, and then timeline for the budget development, and an audit report as your tool for information. And then we sprinkle in some additional filters. What's best for our students? What do we need to pursue our vision? What do we need to move forward with our value unified strategic plan? And what is fiscally responsible for our citizens? And then this year, brand new, what's our COVID-19 impact? Because that's a real thing. And we have those conversations about what our students need, what our teachers need, what our administrators need, and what our communities want, or what they can afford as we're moving forward. This is how a budget spreads out. If you look at what the biggest part of the budget is, it's at the bottom of that period, staffing. Staffing makes up the majority of what our budgets are. Moving up from that is transportation, minor capital, utilities, payroll. Moving up from there is curriculum instruction, then teacher supplies, and then your additions at the top. So a lot of times if your budget's really high and you need to cut it, people say, well, let's cut school supplies. School supplies are almost nothing in terms of a budget. Staffing is where the majority of the budget is. And then you've got to work with your community on ensuring that there's a flow of information and a flow of communication with everything. Show and tell is always important. It's nice to get out in front of crowds and present things. It's a little bit harder in this reality of COVID, so we hope that folks are tuning into our board meetings and listening to what we're putting out, especially when it comes to the budget season and when we're projecting things. But we will put things out on our social media pages and whatnot, and press releases if we have to. So this is our subsidy trend over the past 5 years. You can see that with the exception of 2017 and 18, you'll see that there's been a slight increase in state subsidy over the past 4 years at least, and then a slight decrease in required local contribution. This year is almost identical of a proposed ED 279, what we're getting in our appropriation. It's almost identical. Like I said, a little up on the state side, a little down on the local side, and that's usually good news, especially when there's no drastic changes. Especially this year with all of the concerns over COVID-19, we were very pleased when we received our ED 279 that it wasn't a complete, total disaster. And we'll go over that real quick after I'm done with this. The current school year budget had a 0 increase to local taxes in SAD 27. Although we can't guarantee that'll happen every year, we're always aware of the tax burden, and we commit to not raising taxes unless it's unavoidable. Keeping value unified shared services reduces administrative costs while providing additional administrative and shared services to SAD 27. So in my opinion, this approach to shared services should remain in place, but we've already gone over that. The statement on federal funds specific to COVID-19 pandemic, it's super important to anyone listening to this meeting, and I'll try to remind folks throughout the budget process that all of those grant funds that we got were not money that we could put in our bank account. It wasn't money we could offset the budget. It had to be funds spent specific to react to the pandemic. And so if there was something in our budget in this current year, we couldn't substitute that with COVID funds. We couldn't take the bus that we budgeted for and buy it with COVID funds. We weren't allowed to do that. So people need to be well aware of that, that those expenditures had to be spent to address the pandemic. And additionally, none of these funds could be used to offset future budgets. So we can't put this in the bank and say in the future we're gonna cut some costs on the budget because we have these COVID funds. Will it impact the budget? Yes, I believe it will, because we bought our staff all new technology with COVID relief funds. We're not gonna have to budget that this year for staff members. So it will help in the regular budget, it just couldn't offset one another. So it's important that folks realize that those funds had to be spent in that way. And I know it's hard when you see buildings being erected and you see windows being put in and you see, you know, a new bus or a new minivan. It's hard not to question why that's happening, but you know, we remain transparent that we had to spend that money to address the pandemic. So that's, in a nutshell, how we start the budget process. It's been a challenging year to get started this year because we're so unsure with shared services that, you know, it puts things in limbo. But if we go to the ED 279 documents that I provided you, you'll see that one is circled in green and it says current, and the other one is circled in orange and says proposed. I just wanted to go over a couple of things to compare this year to next year and how we got the numbers that we got. In section A, attending counts, line 3, you see at the end I circled our total students. This current year we're at 365.5. It's an average of 2 years, that's why you have the 0.5. And next year it's projected at 854, so a loss of essentially 11.5 students. When you lose students, usually that's bad. We don't like to see that. But you'll see in a minute that the DOE did some adjustments that helped us out. One of those adjustments is the student to staff ratio for grades 1 to 5. You'll see that they increased that they decreased that from 17 to 1 to 16 to 1 to our benefit. And then you'll see lower in section D, they changed some of the multipliers that really help when we're trying to come up with our calculated EPS rate per pupil. And that calculated EPS rate per pupil is at the bottom. You'll see that this current year, 7,087 for elementary and 7,540 for middle high school. The proposed is a little bit higher for elementary at 7,313 and a little bit higher for secondary at 7,774. So even though we lost students, the changes in calculations gave us a benefit. And that's really important on page 2, where they're determining all of the operating cost allocations. They use those totals. You can see I circled them throughout the middle there. They use those totals at the bottom of page 1 to determine how much we're getting for each of the basic counts, the weighted counts, the targeted funds. So your bottom line there, last year was 5,933,000. This year, 6,027,000. So again, those changes really helped us in the formula. Am I going too fast? Or? Okay. Page 3, you can see that those are our other allocations. So you get money for gifted and talented, special ed, transportation and approved bus allocation. And you'll see that this year, just slightly lower than last year. We got a little bit less money in special ed is the one of the bigger ones of why we're a little bit less, but it's not a total destruction. It's just a little bit less for those other allocations. And then page 4, you'll see that the mill expectation has changed this year for your communities. So moving down from 8.18 to 7.9. That's why we're seeing a little bit less in the local required because of that. So you'll see how those two figures have changed based on the mill expectation change. The money page is page 5. That's where you see all of your totals. And you'll see that our adjusted state contribution, which also includes the money we get for being an education service center, you see that we're getting $43,970 for being part of Valley Unified there. That total compared to last year is up. Last year, $5,508,000. This year, $5,595,000. So that's what was coming in from the state contribution. You'll see right below that, our local share compared to state share has shifted a little bit. They're requiring a little less percentage in local share. It moved down from 35.38% to 34.43%. So our total required local, which is the last figure I have circled, we're requiring less from our local taxpayers, down from $2,992,000 to $2,915,000. So total allocation is almost, like I said, identical. In fact, if you look on the last page and see our monthly payout from the state, our subsidy payout, I think it's like a $5,000 difference in the monthly payout. So it's a really, really close budget, not budget, but allocation for last year. So that gives us some really good information to get started, and that's where Lucy works her magic. And we hope next meeting to give you an idea of where that budget is and what it looks like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That education service center member allocation.
Yep.
43. What's
Based on students.
based on students?
Yep. Based on students that you have in the district.
Is there anything in there that shows us the tuition people?
Not in the 79.
And is there anything in the, if we had the student count for the tuition people like Allegash, Lake, and that, like that number, that gross number, well, you'd have to have it through the grades in order to figure out your ratios.
Yeah.
No.
And Lucy will have that in the revenue sheet when she displays the budget to you. You'll see your tuition agreements and how much you're bringing in from those.
Okay, do you want to make a motion for executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Second.